I'm going without saying, chasing after our
Welcome all of you here in the Edge over there in the living room and everyone joining us online. It's good to have you here in our third week of our relationship series as we kind of tackle this idea that for our culture is so extremely pervasive and important that we're asking these questions. And I think we're doing so and kind of responding to the question of the culture, which is what's going on? What's going to be the identity of your marriages? I think the statistics are in on the baby boomer generation. They're getting divorced at about a rate of 50 to 51%, as it were. And now you get to, as a lot of us in here are now offspring of that and have watched it fail and succeed and all those other things, we now get to join together as the next generation and say, what are we going to do? Like, what's y'all's mark? What's y'all's generation going to be known for? What are we going to, when the history books are written about this, are we going to be a continuation of what was before, or are we going to start something new? There's an arrested development taking place all over culture about this whole marriage thing. We're slowly and methodically pushing off marriage as far as we can, and we're doing so for a lot of reasons. And some of those reasons are great, but the vast majority of them are really poor. And tonight we're going to talk about what are the ways in your relationships, maybe you're in one, maybe you're single as a Pringle. And then girl, I cheer so I can hide my tears. No matter where you find yourself, how am I going to know when I'm succeeding? What does a healthy relationship look like? And I would guess for the majority of us, we don't really have a great example. If you want to turn on the TV and try to find a great example of a godly, mutually beneficial, but glorifying to who he is, on-track relationship, you're going to be pretty hard-pressed to find one. And so we want to open up this conversation and just say, what is it that speaks so true to the heart of who we are as people that we want to get married and stay in love forever, right? Even Juno, like I said, the great theologian Juno from the movie Juno, she asked the question to her dad in the middle of this, what could only be ratified as a movie that is kind of bordering on the brink of saying, forget the whole institution of marriage in general, and yet chock in the middle of the movie, Juno asked this question to her dad. She says, Dad, is it possible for two people to fall in love and stay in love forever? Is it still possible? Not only that, what are the symptoms? What can we see right here and right now? And I talked about it a little bit last week. I get to be in a really unique position in being in what we would consider like a mega church, but the unique thing about North Coast is it's really big, 13,000 people on every weekend. And yet at the same time, North Coast is broken down by campuses and then from campuses into venues to a point where if you walk around North Coast and 90% of our weekend attendance is in life groups, 9 out of 10 of all of our adults are in a place where they can be known on a weekly basis. I have a unique opportunity then to have been able to be a part of dozens and dozens and dozens of marriages, of premarital relationships where I'm trying to coach them in what it looks like to be married, and marriages that are thriving and they just want to take it to the next step. In fact, maybe you guys didn't know this, my original degree in school was in sex therapy. Isn't that weird? I wanted to be a Christian sex therapist. I thought that'd be really cool. You don't care. But I also then get to deal with kind of the flip side of that. I get to talk with people who they walk into the office and they couldn't be more cold to each other. They're just done. Sitting in a room where you sit with couples and one of them just saying, I'm done. And then you sit there and you think back to the wedding day and you think back to the dating relationship and you think back to the beginning of all of the butterflies and the rainbows and everything's going to be perfect and we're going to live on this island forever and everything's going our way and it's like blue skies and it's like Ray Charles and everyone, it's like these great songs and it's just like playing while you're skipping down the street, and now you're sitting here saying, I don't want to be with you anymore. And you go, how did we get here? And what I want to kind of propose to you tonight is that doesn't start all of a sudden. And if you're willing to be honest with your relationship and you're willing to be honest about certain things that are taking place in the relationships of those around you, there are undoubtedly these markers. But If you're really in your relationship, we talked about it week 1, you're like love drunk. They can do no wrong. Their sweat smells like gold. Nothing's wrong with them. And then when someone speaks into your relationship, you side with them. You're like, you're wrong, Mom. You don't know anything, right? And we become bombastic and pugnacious, and we push back against everything, and we isolate ourselves in our own little condition. And if we're not willing to let someone speak into the situation, we will never know if we are defending the most toxic thing in the history of mankind or something that truly was meant to be. Who's speaking into that? You don't know. You're isolated. That is the danger of isolation. You are being compared to nothing except for another person who's love drunk on you. So of course you think it's going great. So if this series can be, for some of us, a grenade into the relationship, and for others of us, it can be a solidification of going, I think we're actually going the right direction. But this doesn't matter if you're not willing to self-assess and be honest with what's going on. And if you are single, and if you aren't engaged, and if you aren't in a dating relationship, you really got to make sure that you're leaning into the conversation, because for a lot of us who are in relationships, our battle is much more difficult because we're having to undo all of the bad ideas we've given ourselves and that our relationship has fostered. You, if you're single, get to sit right now in a position of going, I am not going to fall into these. I'm going to let everyone else pay my dumb tax, and I want to have a healthy relationship. So what are those green flags? Last week we talked about red flags, the 10 things that if I saw it, or if most people saw it, most people who have experienced or been inside of healthy relationships, that they would go, yo, slow down, relax. This is not going well. This is destined for brokenness. This is destined for hurt at least and divorce at most. I really feel like success right now in this relationship series for any of us is that we would either break up right now or stay together forever. The best time to divorce someone is before you ever marry them. And so if we're ready to enter in this conversation tonight, we're going to talk about what are those things, what are the 10 ways that you might be able to self-assess and find out, is my relationship healthy? I know some of y'all are married. Is my marriage healthy? Or maybe you're just talking. Guys, what the frick do these things mean? I'm always sitting there going like, what? Like, oh, I like him. Okay, that's neat. What does that mean? So do you like him? No, I'm not there yet. I'm saying, what? And then one day they're like, I like him. Like, oh, you like him. Wait a minute. Do you love him? Isn't this how we do things? I like him. I like him. I love him. Or no, sorry. I'm falling in love with him. Like, this is where I am emotionally. Here we go. And now I'm fully in love with him. And it's just, we've given these arbitrary definitions to things. And you know what's crazy? And this is where I really want to punch culture in the face. We just keep doing these same asinine, mundane behaviors over and over again. And no one ever stops and goes, frick, is this working? Is the way we do dating, is it working? Are we producing the marriages and the parenting? Is it working? And at the core of y'all's generation is this incessant, stupid idea. I don't mean to call you stupid. Stupid idea that I need to be self-realized. I need to fulfill my potential. I need to find out exactly who I am. But y'all, we were made from relationship. Like, do you understand that? The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are built in perfect unity. And it said we were created in God's image, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So we weren't just made to be in relationship. We come from relationship. And now we are saying, I am not going to understand who I am until I, by myself, in isolation, realize who I am before I'm ready to engage with anybody else. Y'all, you got to realize so much of our identity is from the people around us who love us, that pour into us. So much of who we are in life it's predicated by the people who do surround us. Married couples for generations and generations have gotten married to each other, and they have self-realized who they were inside the confines of a loving relationship, not void of it. And yet we have this idea, and I think the most dangerous thing in our culture that we do is we pursue our potential rather than pursuing our calling. We all want to know, what could I be if unimpeded? Who could I be if no one stood in my way? And that's how we transactionally look at marriage, right? We look at other people and we go, are you going to be good for me financially? Are you going to be good for me emotionally? Are you going to be good for me all these things? Because I've got a plan and I'm looking for someone who can help me for me to achieve what I want to do. Well, that's not marriage, that's a transaction. Can you finance my dreams for me? Can you be the satisfaction of my boredom when I come home every day after chasing my life, my dreams, my future, my hope, and my purpose? And so you're not really courting someone for marriage. You're interviewing someone for a job to satisfy these things that are necessary for you to live out your life as an individual. And guys, we were made for relationship. We were built for it. And some of us, y'all, we were called to a life of singleness. So don't believe any of the crap where people are like, well, listen, you just got to wait for someone God has in store for you. Maybe not. Maybe you'll be single forever. And if you look at people in Scripture who were single, they can do far and exceedingly more than anyone can in marriage. Let me give you a couple names. Jesus. Okay? But here's what we do. We'll be talking about singleness a little bit stronger in the upcoming weeks. But in the meantime, when we're single, you guys have to know, if you're single, you can't freaking sit around and wait for your life to start while at the same time pitching this idea that I'm okay, it's fine. That's what we do, right? It's okay, I'm totally fine. But in the back of your mind, you're on the bench ready to enter the game of life as soon as you get married. And in doing so, you have completely perverted the idea of your season of singleness. You're useless. A single person who thinks that their life begins when they are married presently sits in a position of uselessness. Someone save me. Someone fix me. Someone complete me. And so tonight we're taking that term before we dive too deep into that conversation about saying, what does it look like then in a healthy relationship? Again, if you're single, lean in. If you're dating, lean in. If you're engaged, lean in. If you're married, lean in. If you're divorced, lean in. Because in the middle of a healthy relationship, what we're also going to find is we're going to find the face of the one who created us. Because he is the very definition of truth and health and life and love in the midst of all of it. Number one, let's start assessing our personal relationships. Number one is this concept. Healthy couples practice boundaries. Healthy couples know very well where I end and where they begin. The great M. Scott Peck, he's a famous psychiatrist. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And in so, he talks about this idea of what we call ego boundaries. It's having a marked understanding that I am an individual and you are an individual. And in relationship, I maintain until marriage my complete individuality while you maintain your complete individuality if we want to have a healthy relationship. When those lines get blurred and that water gets murky and I cease to understand where my time and my boundaries are and where your time and your boundaries are, and those coincide with one another, they begin to stir around in like this homogeneous soup, is where you're going to find the recesses and the petri dish of festering unhealth in relationships. Healthy couples practice boundaries. Boundaries in every part of the human experience. First of all, we talk about boundaries inside of the emotions. Healthy couples practice emotional boundaries. Listen, if you're not in a direct position of moving towards marriage, do not manipulatively speak of the future to your significant other. That is an extremely dangerous thing to do. That is a way that we do not practice emotional boundaries. In the middle of these high moments that we have, we're in the middle of making out and our oxytocin's going crazy and our dopamine is off the charts, and you start saying stuff like, what do you want to name our kids? How dare you? You can't talk like that. That's not okay. Because what you're doing in that moment is you are triggering the other person to begin to develop and to see their life together. And if you're not ready to make that kind of commitment, then shut your trap. You can't start having that kind of talk. That means I want emotionally for us to connect that way, but physically and spiritually and intellectually, I'm not ready to make that kind of a commitment. And whenever you commit with only one part of who you are destined to create this codependent structure. You're asking the other person to lean in and start dreaming of these things, but it's just a slip of the tongue of your emotional experience. Healthy couples practice emotional boundaries. Healthy couples practice emotional boundaries. If you've ever said, well, you can go do whatever you want to do, but just so you know, if you go do that, this is how I'm going to act. If you go do that, then when you get back, you're just going to find out that I'm going to be super pissed at you, right? That's emotional manipulation. That's emotional ultimatums, okay? That's bargaining with affection. And it's at the root of insanity is people who bargain. They basically say, depending on how you act is how I'm going to be. You condition people to walk around eggshells around you because you are a ticking time bomb. That's not okay. It's not okay to nag at someone all the time. Okay, if you're in a relationship and you're a dude and you just nag at your girlfriend all the time, that's inappropriate. It's not okay. It's biblically unsound. If you're a girl in a relationship and everything he does, you treat him like a child, then break up with him. Don't date children. Date a man. But here's the issue. Listen, before you clap, here's why you don't break up with him. Because you have confused the maternal instinct to take care with the mature instinct to romance. And you think that your patronization of this child is romance, and it's not. You're confused. It's a Freudian misunderstanding of the issues going on in your brain. You think as long as he needs me, he loves me, but you cannot love what you need, for love is a choice at its core. So if you always, oh man, he's such a child. Oh man, he's such a child. Well, then break up with him. If you're dating someone that you have to defend always because of their immaturity, it doesn't say much about them. It says a ton about you. You got to look in the mirror and go, if I'm constantly berating them for their immaturity, how low must I view myself to remain in a situation where I am romantically engaged with a child in their maturity? Before you get so quick to point out how immature your significant other is, you're dating them. They can't choose in the moment to be around themselves. They have to. It's them. You can choose, and you are volitionally choosing to spend your time in life around a child mature-wise. You have to self-assess and go, why do I stay? Why am I staying? Because they need me. You have mistaken a maternal instinct to care, just like a tiger in the wilderness cares for its young, but that's not romance. That's not a mutual pushing of you towards the glory of Christ. It's you taking a side turn in your relationship in order to parent someone for a while, and because they need to be parented, you've confused the idea of being needed with the love of being wanted. Healthy couples have spiritual boundaries. Christians, listen up, man. This is what we do. We're like, well, we're not having sex, but we just do Bible studies together every day. Excuse me, the frick you do now? We pray together, and then we hold hands when we worship together? Okay. Y'all, that is like the most personal, intimate thing, inviting someone that you're dating into your walk with God and your relationship with God before you've made a covenantal commitment to keep them in your life is going to mess with your understanding of who God is. You should be protecting that. For you to go, but we're not having sex. Yeah, you're doing something that's almost on par with how intimate that situation is. When I see couples in 11, 12, when I was leading the 11th and 12th graders, they're like, well, we just started doing devotionals together. I'm like, you're having sex? They're like, no devotions. I'm like, well, you just told me that's next. There's something so intrinsic to our souls, especially as Christians, about a spiritual interaction we have with people. Do not invite others into that. until they have earned the right through the covenant of marriage to enter into the most important relationship in your life. Well, I won't let them meet my mom yet because I'm not quite there, but I'll let them into my relationship with my King and my Father and Abba, who I call out to in my deepest times of darkness and brokenness and fear and anxieties. They haven't earned that. If you're in that position, uninvite them into the conversation. Your walk with God is your walk with God. Their walk with God is their walk with God. At the moment of marriage, it says the two become one flesh. I don't mean to do any hand signals. The two become one flesh. And then you're invited into that. Create spiritual boundaries. Physical boundaries. This is like the most pastoral thing I could say, right? You're like, oh, let me guess. I shouldn't have sex before marriage. Real clever. Okay, look. Let's pretend. How about I don't cite any scripture right now. Pretend I'm not. Right now I'm going to speak as just an atheist psychiatrist who wants you to have the best possible sex life, love life, marriage life. I want you to have great sex for the next 60 years of your life, and I want it to be fun and rambunctious and weird in whatever capacity you're down. So here goes Chris Hilken. He's gone, and I'm going to come back as an atheist psychiatrist who's simply studying the data when it comes to sex and sexuality and long-term sexual longevity and all those things, and self-reported interest and joy rates when it comes to sexual pleasure. So here goes Chris Hilken, and here comes back the psychiatrist. Don't have sex until you're married. Relax. Someone pour ice water on her. It doesn't matter what study you do. Listen, this is very, 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 very important. Because, especially if you're dating a dude who's in the church, sorry, I'm going to expose you. If you're dating a dude who's in the church, one of our favorite ways to talk about things is to say, well, when it comes to sex, when it comes to sexuality, it feels like this is the next rational step in our relationship, right? And we say, I just feel like I love you so much that I need to express that physically. It's a very common thing, right? If you're going, I've said that exact phrase. Relax. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to bring you shame. I'm here to bring light, to illuminate those different things, those neurotic behaviors in our life. But that's what we say. I love you too much to not have sex with you. What the data shows is that when people engage in premarital and extramarital affairs, specifically we're going to talk about tonight premarital affairs, when people are having sex before marriage, your divorce rate skyrockets. Not only that, the self-reported sexual pleasure of people who are engaging in sex before marriage, long-term in marriage, actually drops dramatically. So, yeah, if the data were different, and I was standing up here going, guys, I know, people who are having sex whenever they want to, however they want to, with whomever they want to, they're reporting the highest level of sexual satisfaction, the lowest level of sexual dysfunction. But here we are, church, we got to go against it, okay? It's just what God tells us. And yet what we're finding is the author and the creator of sex and the orgasm and the experience in itself has written a manual for us, not just to experience it in a way that brings him glory and that honors him inside of his law. It also, what we're finding out in GQ magazine and all of these secular magazines, is he has given us a manual to have the best sex for the rest of our life. It blows my mind because we so often put God as this prudish eye in the sky, and yet when it comes down to it, he's like, I wrote you a manual on how to be the best lover ever, to have the best sex possible for the rest of your life. People who report the highest level of sexual satisfaction in our culture, in comparison to the unmarried bachelor who's in their frat parties or in this female in her sorority, and they're just doing whatever they want, however they want, they're reporting the lowest levels of sexual satisfaction and the highest levels of sexual dysfunction. Meanwhile, our parents, the 40 and 50-year-old people who are engaged in a long-term heterosexual monogamous relationship, are having the best sex of any people group in our culture. Self-reported, and in electrode studies where they actually tie up how strong is your dopamine count, they're winning. And you can put it on trial all you want and go, that's old and that's archaic and that's outdated and that's antiquated. Great. The only thing you have to argue with is the secular studies that are telling you you're wrong. Now, we shouldn't be surprised if God invented the orgasm and says, here's how to use it best. And we go, I'm going to throw out your thing. Why isn't this as good as possible? Because you're not following the Creator's manual for it. So yeah, why do you create physical boundaries? You might go, because God told me to. But instead, what I want you to try to envelop in your relationships is it's not that I love you so much that I need to express myself sexually towards you. You need to start saying, I don't quite love and honor you enough to keep my hands off of you if I really want this to go somewhere forever. Because that's what you're saying. When you're engaging in that, you are jumping into the statistics that skyrocket divorce and go, I'm willing to take this chance because right now I do not practice self-control. Which is why you should absolutely, if you guys are engaged in that stuff, again, there's a pastoral side. You can go, God said no. Or you can understand that God said so much yes to what he actually created us for, that we stop looking at him as this big, archaic, bum, 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 you hate us. But instead going, I actually trust God's plan for this more than anything else. It doesn't make sense. Culturally, it's taboo. Like, y'all watch The Bachelor, right? I have a friend who watches The Bachelor. His name's Chris Hilken. And now all of a sudden, if you're a virgin on The Bachelor, everyone stops. Like a cow in the headlights, and they're like, what? Well, then how do you know what you like? As if people for thousands of years were going, I don't know what I like. I don't even know. How does this work? Is there a diagram I can see? Y'all, people figure it out. And what we've done with sex is this. We have idolized it to such a point that the more that we worship it and the more that we seek it, the more that we've lost its actual meaning, the more that we've lost its actual power. So this isn't a call, this isn't like your big abstinence talk, like, hi, I'm your abstinence teacher. If you have sex, God will stab you in your face. You understand? You will get an STD, then you'll get pregnant with triplets, and then you'll die. Like, I hope by this time in my experience in the Jordan, I've earned enough credibility with you to tell you, I'm not coming up here to give an abstinence talk because God's here to take away your fun. Instead, I'm saying God is the designer, the author, and the perfecter of sex. And he has said, if you do it my way, no pun intended, if you do it my way, you will do it the best way. So it's not about thinking about God withholding. It's about trusting God enough to know what he's doing. And so it's a lack of trust we have in his plan. So, and again, if you're in that, or if like you guys are sleeping together, and I know a lot of you guys are sleeping together, I don't want you to sit here and go, he brought me shame. There is no shame in those who are found in Christ. There's no shame for you. But there is a biblical call to say, engage in the conversation. Have a conversation with each other and say, what do we actually want long term? Is this a transaction that we're okay with doing for a little bit and then you go your way and I go my way? Or can you take a step back and go, what is this? Do we actually trust God's plan for this thing? But y'all are, no matter what's going on in your lives or in your bedrooms or whatever, know that you're welcome here. God's not someone who says, you get perfect and then come in my doors. But I just, again, because of my deep love for you and all the relationships that I've had to walk through and the divorces that I've seen happen, I want you to engage in this conversation in such a way that you're able to be honest and open with it without shame. And if you're not a virgin or if you're not any of those things, you are no less important or desired or wanted or loved or sanctified or redeemed or perfected by what God has done in you in your life. And if you've been made by the church to feel lesser than or oppressed or marginalized, I want to, on behalf of the church, condemn all of those things that have aimed to bring you shame, because that's not the God that we serve. We do, however, serve a God who wants you to engage in what John 10:10 says is life abundantly. I'm inviting you and I'm beckoning you to a way of doing sexuality that is better than the way that you're doing it. I'm not calling you to refrain from a really great thing that you're doing and instead replace it with something that's really boring and mundane. I'm asking you to give up the mud pie in order to engage in God's filet mignon, right? That's the call of God. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And so many of us were engaged in these different sexual relationships. And what the Bible says is there's something so core to sex that is, this is going to get weird, but here we go. Sex is at its core not supposed to be this neurotic behavior where you sit there and go, am I doing it okay? Am I better than the last person they were engaged with? Are they still going to like me after this one? What if they show up and they don't know me? There's this woman who wrote this incredible article in the New York Times a few weeks ago, and she talked about, she was 31 years old and she was having sex with this 24-year-old, and the 24-year-old guy, and it was a 31-year-old girl, and they were having sex, and she said it was this really weird experience where the guy kept asking for consent for every single thing that he did. He would go, can I touch your blouse? Is it called a blouse? Can I touch your blouse? I was reading it, so I don't really know how you pronounce it. Can I touch your blouse? To which she said, yes. Can I take off your pants? To which she said, yeah. And it walked through this whole thing. She said at the end of it, she felt so honored because this guy had been taught to give consent for everything. And the next day he got up and he left and then he ghosted her. And she said it was so confusing because we have so tied sex to a physical experience that we've asked for consent for everything physical, and not once did he stop and go, can I use you for exactly what I want today and then ghost you for the rest of your life? There was no spiritual consent. There was no emotional consent. There was only physical consent. What kind of a deal do we make of emotional consent? Is this actually what you want? Are you just trying to fulfill something right now? Is there fear in this experience? Because sex is supposed to be intrinsically not a fear-filled experience. Do you know that you are truly known and fully loved no matter what happens in this experience? We don't ask that kind of consent. We just go, can I touch your bra? Can I touch your pants? Can I touch your socks? That's so romantic. Oh, crap, that's romantic. Sex, if it was simply an experience of the physical, that would be the most romantic set of questions. And she left going, I've never felt so dirty in my whole life because he never asked for consent to use me and then leave me. That's exactly what he did. Social boundaries. Healthy couples create social boundaries. Okay? That means healthy couples know that one of the healthiest things that you can do is to make sure that the other person in your relationships, social structures and social circles are well suited, and that they are pouring into those things, that you don't monopolize their time and their energies at all time. Like if you require your boyfriend or girlfriend to speak with you on the phone for 2 hours every night, pulling them out of all their circles and social situations, and they let you do that because they're afraid to face what life has in store for them, you're not loving them. You're crippling them. And too often our social situations before we get married, we just say, you tie to me completely. Let's go into our own little sphere in our temporal lobe here and say, let's just do whatever we want to do at all times. When I wake up, I text you, and then we plan our day together, and we're going to make it work together, and then I'm going to see you for the whole day, and then afterwards I'm going to come here, I'm going to be the last thing you hear before you go to bed tonight, the first thing you see the next morning when you wake up. And you're essentially married, except you're choosing to sleep in different rooms, or at least different houses. Sometimes even not then. Social boundaries are important. Sometimes you can be unavailable and you don't need a great reason for it. Do you want to hang out tonight? No, thanks. Well, how come? What do you mean, how come? No, thanks. Well, you need a good reason. Why? You asked, do I want to hang out tonight? I said, no, thanks. Well, what else are you doing? Nothing. I do not want to hang out. You ever had that happen before? I had someone I was dating one time. She said, do you want to hang out tonight? I said, no, thanks. Stopped dating that night. It was really weird. Next one. Healthy couples live in glasshouse relationships. They have glasshouse relationships. This whole nonsense of our relationship is private, that's garbage. That's stupid. That's what guys tell you, that they want to keep your relationship private so that healthy people can't speak into what you're doing, right? It's like a lion on the savannah getting a zebra by itself. But my herd is over there. No. This is private. Just come here. I want to talk to you. I want to whisper something in your ear, boo. And then when you have it all alone, then all of a sudden your cries for help can't be heard. And then you feel so shame-filled and so isolated that you feel like turning back would now be a complete misuse of your character then. That you're so far gone, you can't possibly go back in. Live in a glass house relationship. Let people speak into it. Let people see into it. your relationship is personal, but it is not private, and it should not be private. It is personal between two persons. But when you say it's private, what you're basically saying is no one else can speak into it, and that's the epitome of isolation and unhealth. Next one. They have explanation. They provide generous explanations for unmet expectations. Okay, so essentially, the core of all conflict in relationships comes about when we have something that we expected versus something that was realized, right? I expected that he would call me before work. The realization is that he didn't call me before work. And then we're stuck with a gap in between what was expected and what was realized. What was my expectation? Over here on one side of the chasm, I expected that we would go see this new movie together, and what was realized is that she went and saw that movie with her friends instead of me. What was expected over here is that I would get invited, we would all get invited to this guy's birthday party, and what was realized is that none of us got invited to this guy's birthday party. This is where all conflict comes from. It comes from we have an expectation that isn't met. There's a gap between what was expected and what was realized. If there were no expectations, there would be no conflict. It would just be. The reason the reason it has meaning is because we all expect something in different situations. Healthy couples provide generous explanations for the gap between what was expected and what was realized. To provide a generous explanation means that if I tell Paige, hey, tonight I'm going to be home from the Jordan at like 10:30, and then I get home at 11:30, and I walk in the door, Paige in the meantime has to add narrative to the reality. There's a gap. You're supposed to be home at 10:30. What was realized is you're home at 11:30. There's a gap here. She can't change the fact that this was the expectation. She can't change the fact that this is what was realized. What she has total power over is the narrative she tells herself until the truth is realized. She can either say, that Christopher has done it again. He's probably hanging out there just kicking it with his friends, and he sees the time passing by, and he looks at his watch, and he laughs hysterically, thinking, she's probably worried sick about me. I hope one of our kids vomits tonight, and I'm not home so she can clean it up all by herself. That will teach her to trust and love and to admire me more when I am home. Take that, Paige. She can tell herself that story. Or she can say, this must have been a really hard night for Chris. Something must have come up. I'll bet there was a student in this relationship series who's probably going through a lot of crazy stuff, and they want to engage with him and just say, hey, what do I do in this? Or maybe they've experienced some kind of abuse or kind of sexual abuse in their life, and I'll bet Chris and his team was there for them, and he felt like it was rude in that moment to stop and text me and let me know that he's going to be a little bit late, and I really hope that he was able to, through the power of the Spirit, give them the right words at the right time to plant wisdom in their head, and I really hope that everything turns out well for them. And then I arrive at home. And depending on what story she told herself, she is either at DEFCON 9 anger, or she's in a position of complete understanding and humility, ready to hear, why are you late? And now she's going to find out the truth. And I might go, baby, I blew it again. I blew it again. I know I was supposed to come at 10:30. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I don't know what happened. I lost track of time. Then I looked up at 11:30, and then I freaked out because I knew I was going to be disappointing you again. And I hate disappointing you. And I hate that I keep doing it. I even set an alarm, and then I put my phone on silent because I was going to be teaching tonight. So I didn't hear my alarm. I'm so sorry. If she's at DEFCON 9, she's going, oh, it's okay. That's so funny how your phone is always on silent when you're, right, this isn't how my wife talks. I don't know why. Like, this is like, that's not how she is. But that's where we have healthy couples. When this has happened, as soon as someone's late, unhealthy ones go, oh my gosh, they're the worst. I hate when they do this. They're probably, and you get to add narrative, healthy couples lean in and say, I am going to provide the most generous explanation for why this gap is here. You will find that they move towards resolution 1,000 times faster than people who have to undo 9 levels of DEFCON to finally find out what the truth is and then reach resolution after that. Next one. Healthy couples fight fair. Okay, I'm going to bring my wife up for this one to kind of walk you through a system that we have kind of created over the years. Hey, come on up. This is my wife, Paige. Yo. Oh, that's very loud. Here you go, Mama. Come on up here. This is Paige. She is, apart from being my husband, she is the mother. Yeah. Yeah. Technically. We're a very progressive couple. Apart from being my wife, she is mother to our 4 kids. She's a serial entrepreneur. She has started and runs a series of businesses. She is summa cum laude from her graduating class at Concordia University. She's brilliant. She skipped a grade. She started college at 17. She graduated at 19. We got married a month later when she was 19. She's a national softball champion pitcher. You really don't want I feel insecure all the time standing next to her because she dwarfs me with the amount of love and power and captivation of who she is. This is my partner in life. This is my bride. This is my lover. She's everything to me. And we're going to walk you through a little bit of how we fight fair. Now, when we first got married, this was a very systematic approach that we took because we had a really hard time about talking about things that upset us. Maybe you guys are in the same boat. And so you try different things, criminally speaking. Some of you you jump into a cocoon of solitude, and you're quiet and you ignore people and you wait for the other person to bring it up. Others of you say things passively like, oh yeah, why don't you shut the door? Are you mad about something? Oh yeah, no, I'm fine, right? There's like the passive aggressive status. And we have found that we wanted to kind of create a system by which we could walk through a fight and reach a conclusion in a way that was healthy and productive and fast, rather than spending 11 hours trying to navigate the gray of it. So we created this, we call it Mash It, MASHIT, and we walk through this now instinctively without having to say it out loud. But this is how we resolve conflict. If you want to steal it, you can steal it. Feel free to use it in your relationship. And so we want to start walking you through what it means when we talk about mashing it. So what does the M stand for, Mama?
My circumstances.
Okay, what does that mean?
You just want to make sure that anytime you bring up conflict, that it's under the proper circumstances. So I had to learn this early on in our marriage, that bringing up something right before Christopher was leaving to go speak at the Jordan or at a church event was not a good time to bring it up, because then the whole time he's on stage, he's going to be thinking about that. He can't fully do his job well. We're not going to be able to address it in that allotted amount of time, so it's really pointless to bring it up. Another example would be if you're really tired, exhaustion, what's that thing? Exhaustion makes cowards of us all. It's just going to mess with your emotions. It doesn't put you in a good state to talk about something. If you're really heated in the moment, that's also not a good circumstance to talk about something. Both of us, I think, grew up in a lot of circumstances where our parents did handle conflict in the heat of the moment and just never went well. Lots of yelling, lots of blow-ups. And
How many of y'all as parents kind of trial by fire? Everything's at the top of their lungs kind of a thing. How many of y'all have more manipulative, like passive-aggressive parents? That's how they fought growing up? Yeah. We both had bombastic parents that yelled and screamed and called each other names. And we kind of committed early on that we never wanted to do that. And to this point in our marriage, we've never yelled at each other. We've never raised our voice towards each other. This is our 7th year of marriage, 4 kids under the age of 5. Yeah. And I think part of it is because we just committed early on that we didn't want to be part of that lineage of anger and yelling and belittling. And so we first talk about making sure that our circumstances are in the right place, that my circumstances, that's the M for that. What does A stand for? AIM. A stands for AIM. She doesn't love the acronyms.
This is my first time speaking in this many people, so I'm a little nervous.
You're doing great. AIM is one thing that I think is lost in a lot of conflict is to create a goal for the end of the conflict, right? So we're not having the argument for its own sake. We're having the discussion for the sake of resolution. So when we experience a moment to move from M to A, we now want to aim at what we want the situation to be by the end of it. So what's a circumstance that we might have a disagreement on? Maybe a one we've done recently.
Yeah, I mean, we can just stick with what you were talking about earlier. Maybe for the first time, I think it's helpful to go over, like, maybe this is the first time you've been late home from something.
Yeah.
How we would handle that.
So and I have a habit of this. This happened, I guess it happened last week where I did the same thing. No, a couple days ago from work. Anyway, I was supposed to be home at X time, and then I got out of whatever meeting that I was in. It was on Monday. I was supposed to be home at 5:30, and then I ended up getting home at 6:30. We were playing basketball, and then afterwards I engaged in a conversation. And in the middle of that, I didn't want to leave and go do something else. So I called her on the phone, and she provided an extremely generous explanation for why I was late, but it still kind of brought up a little bit of that disagreement. So an aim, what would that sound like? If I get home and I can tell that she's a little bit off, she greets me at the door, she provides a generous explanation, and now it's time to bring up the conflict. My circumstances are good, and now we move on to A. What does it sound like?
So yeah, in aim, you want to always make sure that it's you and your partner against the fight, not you versus your partner. So you're going to use language that helps the partner understand that. So, hey babe, I hate that I'm feeling this way. I want to be on the couch with you at the end of the night, snuggling, watching a TV show.
That's cool. Keep going, mama. Keep talking. Tell him what's up.
Watching a TV show.
Oh, okay. Netflix. Keep going. Keep going. Just keep going.
Making this really hard. Watching a TV show. It's kind of just weighing on me. Is it okay if we talk about something really quick?
Good. So in doing that, we've created a team against the circumstance. Instead of her going, how dare you, she's saying, let's join together and solve this so that we can mutilate this thing over here so that, here's our aim. Because in an hour, I want to be able to hang out with you and to have a great conversation. We had so much go on today. I want to tell you what the kids did, but right now I feel like there's this wall between us. And it's because I feel like there was a little bit of a break in what was expected and what was realized today. Now I'm ready to get on her team. Man, I don't feel like she's attacking me. I feel like we're attacking what happened, even though I need to take responsibility for what happened. So after that, we move on to S, okay?
Situation.
What's
Bring
the situation?
Up the situation. So once, obviously, he said, yeah, go ahead. We can talk about this if it's a good circumstance. I'm going to bring up what actually happened. So I know that you were probably filling the gap with a positive filling that gap with the positive. I know you were probably caught up with a student or with someone, and it was really important. I think that it just makes me feel undervalued or like second to whatever you're dealing with when you don't just shoot me a quick text when you're late. Is it okay if in the future maybe, I don't want to move on because that's the next step, but
for sure.
Yeah.
And in this step, we really want to use we language rather than you language. Like, you did this to me, you made me feel this way. Because ultimately, could we imagine a scenario where I showed up an hour late and I was married to someone who didn't care at all? Sure. Could you imagine a scenario where someone's like, I'm late too, who cares that you're late? So we don't always want to put the impotence in the other person, like, you made me feel this way. So the more that you can put it on yourself and your own emotions and your own feelings, the more that you take away any potential bickering. When she just says, look, I know that we had said that you'd be home at this time, and I know that wasn't exactly realized, and you actually jump to, it makes me feel undervalued, and it kind of plays at this insecurity that I have, that maybe I'm not as important as I'd want to be, and I just want to talk to you about that. And in the whole thing, it's her and I versus the circumstance. So the situation is brought up. The next one is H, which means hush. So that's where I, as the guilty party, am going to be quiet. And I'm going to listen. I'm going to take an active listening stance. I'm going to turn my body towards her. If appropriate, I'm going to break the touch barrier. Paige and I, when we have discussions, we like to be holding hands or something else like that. What you'll find is just even the physical connection of being together calms emotions down, and then it creates a natural feeling of us against whatever's going on, rather than there's that invisible wall of me versus you. So we break the touch barrier, and then I hush, and then I listen to what she's saying, and I'm actively listening. So as she's explained to me, it made me feel undervalued. I'm trying to reciprocate that, and I'm trying to say, okay, yeah, it sounds like in those moments, you look at the clock, and then you look at my location, and you just think, man, he's not even paying attention to this, and I totally understand how that would make you feel undervalued. And that's my verbiage. I can totally get that. I apologize for that. So hush is the next one. I'm going to practice active listening techniques. I'm going to turn my body towards her to show her that I'm engaged in the conversation. I'm nodding along with her. I'm using reciprocating language so that she knows I hear you. Okay. After H, hush, we move on to I, which is I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So that's where I am going to begin the process of apologizing by not using manipulative sorries. A manipulative sorry is like, well, look, no one's perfect. That's a manipulative sorry. Or, I'm so sorry you felt that way. That's a manipulative sorry. A non-manipulative sorry is to take full responsibility for what I did and to understand how that could have made her feel that way. So I would say, I'm so sorry that I did that again. I knew the expectation and I just completely went against it. And I can't believe I keep hurting you like that. And I hate that I undervalued you. I hate that I made you feel that way. And I am so sorry, because the last thing I ever want to do is to bring you an ounce of pain. And I know that I'm doing that consistently. And it's hard to believe me, but I really don't like doing that. And I want to do so much better. I'm so sorry that I treated you that way. Okay, did you hear that? I'm so sorry I treated you that way. Not I'm so sorry you felt that way. I'm so sorry that I did that to you. Not I'm so sorry that you felt like I did something to you. Okay, after that, what's last?
Well, we always both apologize in this step.
That's part of our
and
culture,
yeah, important, I think, just because then we feel like we're, again, on the same team.
How would you apologize on something that's so blatantly my fault? Give them an example of how you would apologize in that moment.
Well, I think that our emotions are usually always a reaction to an insecurity or something that's going on within us. And so a lot of the times I might not even notice that the time's going by or that an hour's gone by, but maybe I had a really hard day with the kids. So I might just take that moment to say, like, yeah, I'm sorry. I know this really isn't that big of a deal. It was only an hour and it was something that was really important for your work. I think that I just had a really tough day with the kids. And so I'm sorry for reacting about it, but I'm glad that we can address it and hopefully prevent it in the future.
One of the beauties of kind of our insistence that we always both apologize is then you're never stuck in that awkward position where you apologize and then you're looking at the other person like, your turn? That nothing kills reconciliation like waiting for the other person to apologize when they're not going to. So we just always do it. And I guarantee you, if you had a negative reaction towards something someone did, you have something to apologize for. Even in this situation, I'd be neurotic if I thought that it was her fault. Totally my fault. But she still finds a way to say, and I'm sorry that was such a visceral reaction for me to be angry at you, and then we move on. And the last thing is T. What's T stand for?
Target.
What's Target mean?
Just your expectations.
We run to Target.
Yeah.
Go to the $1 section? No, I'm just kidding. What's Target?
Target is your expectation. So you want to, obviously, anytime you have a conflict, hopefully prevent this similar conflict from continuously happening in the future. So setting a target for how are we going to move forward from this? What can I do better in the future? How can I love you better?
Yeah, and that's where I am going to practice repentance and say, I know that I had my phone and I know that I created a timer and everything. And next time, and then I start to make a game plan. Next time, what I'm going to do is if I see myself beginning to enter that conversation, I need to just be rude and say, hey, y'all, I just got to send my wife a quick text in this moment, and I didn't do that this time, and I need to do better at that next time. And at that point, that kind of is the end of our conversation. We both apologize. We know exactly where we want to go in the future. We've made restitution, and we've moved on, and then we generally make out. Anyway, thanks so much, Mom. I appreciate you. All right. She is the literal goat. We're going to race through a few more of these things as we round up. And we'll be talking more about these on our Instagram this week. Keep going. Refuse to compare. We talked about this kind of ad nauseum last week, but making sure that whoever you're married to someday is your new standard of beauty, which means that your connection to old things or old beauty in your head needs to be cut off. And then to voice that externally and make someone feel that they don't measure up to your new definition or your old definition of beauty is nothing short of abuse. To talk to someone about how they don't quite measure up to something else when we at our core so desperately want to be enough. When you know that about yourself and yet you implicate that on somebody else, it's nothing short of a version of emotional abuse. Refuse to compare. Next one. Encourage one another's personal growth. I talked about almost all this stuff at the beginning because I got on a rant, but encourage each other's personal growth. Make sure that you're pushing them to be who God has called them to be and that they are pushing you to who God has called you to be. Way too often in dating relationships, especially when I experience something where I have wronged someone outside of our relationship, way too often my significant other will tell me it's not you, it's them, right? Let's say you get in a big fight with your dad and you were just a total jerk to him and you go and you talk to your girlfriend and she goes, oh my gosh, your dad is so ridiculous sometimes. When what she needs to say is, Go home and solve things with your dad. Go home and make reconciliation with your father. You cannot treat your father like that. Go home and make amends. That's to encourage each other's personal growth. Where too often we are a catch-all basket for all the issues in their life. We go, not here, it's not an issue. Here you are always perfect. And that is a great way to hate someone. To not push them towards growth and not push them towards love and not push them towards reconciliation is to bring them into your own little pit of despair and say, you're perfect, everyone else is wrong. And when that honeymoon phase wears off, they're going to look up to you and go, but I thought I was perfect. And you're going to go, I just said that. I just made you think that. Well, me and my dad are fighting, or me and my everything. Well, you've already cut ties with all of them because I made you and I convinced you that it was always their fault and never yours. That's not the way that we love people. Next one, the Brave New World concept. Okay, simply said, you need to give up what you want now to get what you want most. Give up what you want now to get what you want most. Understand that if you're dating someone with the intention of marrying them someday, the way that you are conditioning them, that's what Brave New World's all about, the way that you're conditioning them day in and day out, if they are trying to engage with their family and you're pulling them away, what you're telling them is to engage with family is inferior to being with me. Well, if you are trying to condition someone to become someone that someday is going to operate and run your family, or to be the matriarch of your family, or to be a really incredible family woman or a really incredible family man, you can't the whole time that you're dating tell them family's less important, family's less important, family's less important, family's less important, friends are less important, friends are less important. Then what you're going to find is you're going to get married and you're going to be their whole world. And they're not going to be a family man, and they're not going to be a family woman, and they're not going to be someone who's got friends, and they're not going to be someone who knows how to socialize, because you've conditioned them that all those things are wrong. Be careful not to condition someone to become who you need to date without trying to push them to become who they need to be married. Does that make sense? Your goal should not be to make great daters of your person that you're dating, but to push them to be great spouses, even if it's not for you someday. Don't encourage them to date really well, because oftentimes dating really well, to fixate in our culture, when we say date really well, often means to be a really bad spouse. Because it means don't practice margin, don't practice boundaries, don't practice those things. So make sure we're conditioning those things. Next one. Here's a really important question. I just want you to write it down. I'm not even going to go into it. When it comes to conflict in your relationship, at your core, do you truly desire to be reconciled over your desire to be right? When you engage in conflict, do you care more about being right or ending the argument? If you have such a pride that wells up in you that you want to fight just for its own sake and you want to make sure that you're right, and at the end of the conflict, she is crying and she is sad and she is weeping because of the way that you've hurt her, but you've made your point, you have won the battle and lost the war. Don't engage in rightness over reconciliation. Next one. I got your 6. Healthy couples protect each other verbally when it comes to a really simple scenario where they could belittle you or berate you or make fun of you or ostracize you. I see this a lot where, and this is something I'm so grateful with Paige, is if Paige and my mom are hanging out and my mom goes, oh my gosh, you know Chris, he leaves his socks wherever he wants. Instead of Paige, it would be so easy for her to go, oh, I know, what an idiot. Instead, my wife goes, yeah, sometimes he gets so busy and he does such a great job of taking care of us and providing for our family and being the father and the man of God that he is, that I am happy in some seasons to make sure that I take care of that for him. And my mom goes, anyway, right? When you protect someone like that and you say, I am not going to be a port in the storm of your anger, even if it's towards my significant other, you become this couple where everyone goes, if I want to get to him, I certainly don't go through her because she's got his back. And if I want to get to her, certainly don't go through him because all he has to say is, you're not going to get anywhere with me. I've got her 6. That's 6 is your back. 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever. Next one. Last one. Understand the meaning of it all. Here's just a phrase I want you to write down. This is perhaps the most transformative question that I've ever been asked in the history of my married relationship. I want you to write this down. It can be for anything in your life, though. You can fill in the blank. What if the purpose of blank? What if the purpose of blank? You can fill in the blank there. For me right now, I'm going to be talking about marriage. This is a question I have to ask myself all the time. Chris, what if the purpose of your marriage was not to make you happy, but to make you holy? Friend, what if the purpose of your dating relationship wasn't actually meant to make you happy, but it was meant to make you more like Jesus? It was meant to mature you and to grow you. What if the purpose of parenting is not for your happiness, but for your growth? What if the purpose of your singleness, that you keep trying to find worth and meaning and joy in your singleness, what if its purpose is not to bring you happiness, it's to bring you holiness? It's to teach you satisfaction in Christ and Christ alone. What if it isn't just a season before your true happiness begins? And what if we start putting everything in its proper position, knowing that everything in your life, its ultimate purpose is to grow you into becoming more like the image of the God that we serve, and not to tickle some fancy you have to be a little bit happier of a person? What if marriage was not meant to make you happy, but to make you holy? What if dating wasn't meant to make you happy, but to make you holy? What if your singleness was not meant to make you happy, but to make you holy? What if your fiance is not meant to make you happy, but to make you holy? What if your girlfriend? What if your boyfriend? What if your friend? What if your mom? What if your dad? What if your brother? What if your sister? What if your situation? What if your job? What if your occupation? What if your career? What if it wasn't meant, the big understanding of it all, it actually wasn't about you being happy? What if it was all about you becoming more like Jesus? It takes every burden of responsibility to bring you joy off of everyone and everything in your life, when their only role is to push you to become more like Jesus, because anything can do that. If someone takes you to the edge of anger, then you can understand God's true patience and you can cultivate that in your heart. If in your singleness you feel alone, you can understand that our God also was alone, and yet he found his sufficiency in his communion with his Father. You might interact with someone, you say, they absolutely betrayed me, to which you can understand what it felt like to have his own face kissed, to be betrayed by one of his best friends. Maybe you have a parent who's domineering on you and they don't let you have any space, and you're not experiencing any freedom. And in that, you have to practice true godly forgiveness to become more like Christ, and saying, I got to forgive even the unforgivable people in my life. What if everyone and everything in your life, including your relationships, your dating relationships, and your marriage, had nothing to do with this moving target of happiness, but instead this rock solid historical cross of Christ's holiness? It is in that you will, and is in that and only in that you will find what Paul talks about in the New Testament as the secret of contentment. And until you understand that truth, you will grasp at straws, or you will try to restrain the wind with your relationships and your future marriages, trying to fit them into a chasm of happiness that cannot be filled, because marriage was not meant to bring you happiness. Scripture says again and again, it is meant to conform you to the image of God himself. Marriage at its core is one big fat analogy of when you know someone doesn't deserve love, but you give it to them anyway, because we didn't deserve love and God gave it to us anyway. What if your life was not meant to make you happy, but to make you holy? Would you pray with me? God, in a room of this size, and over in the living room, and everywhere in between, everyone watching online, we know that as we start to talk through these things, it can be so easy to slip into this shame cycle. God, I want to absolutely condemn anyone sitting here right now who begins to think that the purpose of talking about your purpose for their relationships, for their marriage, for their future, or the way that you've created us to love one another was meant to bring them shame or to isolate them. Instead, it is meant to invite them and to beckon them, to slip an invitation off the table, over the table, from you to them, simply saying, I want you to love better. As you call us out of the places in our life where we're practicing these things like a breaking of the boundaries or a codependency. God, when you're calling us to stop idolizing each other, you're not saying don't idolize each other, idolize nothing. You're saying don't idolize each other because I am better. When you say, when God, in your scriptures, when you talk about your purpose and your meaning for sexuality and for sex, you're not saying just stop having sex. You're saying refrain from this because what I have for you is better. Your love is better than life. Your love is better than anything I could get out of any other person that I could possibly date. And God, for some of us in here, we just need a complete rewiring of our heart to actually trust that when you talk about relationships and marriage, that you are the author, you are the creator, the perfecter, and the founder, and we simply need to submit to you. May the Jordan always be a place of peace and of comfort and of welcoming and of love and never of shame and never of condemnation and never of taking people out and of never not welcoming people because of anything, including their sexual past or even their sexual future or their sexuality as a whole, that none of that, when it measures up to your perfection in the cross, that we are all called your sons and daughters for those of us who are found in you. May we feel your love even in the community that we live here in. God, we love you. We thank you for loving us. In your name we pray. Amen.